This is a test, Max. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself then.
Hi, everyone. If you haven't already, go ahead and just put your name and where you're from in the chat so we record that.
Can you point me towards that chat? Oh, I found it. Thank you.
All right. Morning, everyone. This is Max with the rest of NDE here. This is our monthly district update call for Advisor. Let me update you on a few things. On the Advisor validation website, we've put out a few fixes, such as there was a bug affecting some reports for people in the Mountain Time Zone. It was changing dates. We've got that rolled out. And we are continuing to work on the validation site. Lately, I've gone through and tweaked and upgraded some of the attendance reports in the course reports. One I wanted to talk about was the student attendance summary. Two big features were added to this report. Okay. Can't get that to zoom in between. Well, hopefully you can see that. The first thing on this student attendance summary, we have added these parameters from and to date. I think under NSSRS, this report was always broken down by quarter because that was how you submitted your student summary attendance templates. So under Advisor, by default, it just pulls in the full year, the full calendar for your students. But now if you want to check your data, you can put in parameters to specify whatever date range you need. Note that if you put the parameters in at the top, you'll see this little piece of text added in the at the header here that tells you that you selected those dates. In the students you see here, even if you selected a date range, their enrollment date does not actually change because that is literally, that's their start date and their end date, or if they have no end date, I believe it just says 6:30. However, the days present, absent, and enrolled, these fields change based on what you've picked. So typically, if a student's enrolled for the full year, you would say like 171 days enrolled. But in this case, this ends up with like 50 days, I'm guessing, is the full calendar for this time period. at this school. Then the other feature I added just to try to communicate better about, you know, how this works in the ADA and ADM calculation. You know, these days present and days absent, days enrolled columns, these are literally just counting the days. The student is in this calendar for 50 days, or this student's in the calendar for 50 days, and they have 9 days worth of absences reported. And if you report half absences, you know, it would say like 8.5 here. However, the FTE is taken into account in the ADA and ADM calculation, basically prorating or weighting that student's days present, days absent according to their FTE. So we've added these other columns here, and if this name for the column doesn't make sense to you, let me know if you have any other suggestions. That basically just does the math for you, saying if this kid had an FTE of 10, then instead of being present for 50 days, they basically count as 5 days. But, you know, I mean, they're still there for 50 days, but they're only weighted 1/10 as much as the student who's there full time in the ADA and ADM. So, does anyone have any questions about this? Any suggestions for other changes on this report? Do you understand the new features, or you want any other changes to be made? If you want to say something, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat. All right, I'll take that as things are okay as they are. Next up in advisor validation features, we are beginning to design new roles so that just like under NSSRS validation, different roles had access to different pieces of data. Right now, you have access to everything on the advisor validation site. Here is our plan. I was thinking for adding these new roles. Basically, we will create a new role that's like, there'd be one role called like FRL access, or another role called discipline data access. And I was thinking these roles would be in addition to the role you already have. Right now you have a district role. I think it's just called district. So what we would do then is when these new roles go out, we would actually remove your access from the FRL data and the discipline data at this time. And then if you need access to that data, you would go to the portal and add back those codes, or add these additional codes. So you would have your district code, and then you also add your FRL code and your discipline code. We could definitely talk about setting these codes up for people ahead of time. I'm not sure that everyone who has access to the system now should have access to all of this data, but we could definitely, you know, get the data steward list or superintendents at a minimum, make sure we set up the codes for them. Is there any objections to that idea for how the codes would work?
What's your timeline on that, Max?
I don't know yet, but probably in March.
And that
Okay.
will display any district level discipline reports. No student level discipline reports will not be made available until those codes are implemented.
Yeah, we've already started working on those reports, but we don't want to release them until we get this all set. So.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that. We'll really use those.
All right. Yeah, I don't know. I think under NSSRS it worked different where there was just everyone would only get one code, but you would, or you could have multiple codes.
Yeah, you could have
Yeah.
multiple codes
Okay.
for the different programs.
All right, good. That makes sense.
There were several.
I know FRL and discipline are the two main ones that we're looking at, but we may add some others as well, depending on what people need.
Or don't.
Yeah, or don't need access to these. All right, so yeah, we are pushing forward on designing that. I will give you another update about that at the March meeting. Other things we're looking at, we still have more bug fixes we're working on, demographic lookups and timeouts. Sped lookup is, I consider that a demographic lookup, but yes, sped and demographic lookups. We're working on additional GCAT reports. We've got just some basic cohort data running right now, stuff that we needed for the assessment labels. But we hope to be building more data nightly and then having some reports that would mimic the GCAT tool from NSSRS. So we are looking at that now. I don't have an exact date on when that will be ready. We'll probably be rolling those out in pieces. So we'll be adding them to the graduation cohort section of the reports as we go. Some other, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. You have the, we're talking about demographic lookups. I know at one point you talked about the enrollment lookups bringing in all the information from previous enrollments. And I thought that was supposed to be out there, but I don't see it out there. Is there a timeline on that?
Yeah, in the NSSR side. Yeah, actually, that is ready to go. I think we could turn that on now. So, yeah, we were waiting to roll that out for something. Now I don't remember. But yeah, actually, I think I could flip the switch and let that go. It slows it down a little bit. It takes a couple of seconds to load. But yeah, we've got that data out there.
That would be helpful to not have to flip back and forth between NSSRS and Advisor.
I think before that went out, we had to make a little fix because under the NSSRS enrollment data either has an exit date or an entry date, but not both together, which is different than the Advisor enrollment data, which always has an entry date and may or may not have an exit date. So we had to make a little fix to support that. So
Okay.
yes, I will find out where that is at.
Great.
I forgot. So yeah, speaking of other data processes, I'll be starting to work on some other of these kind of nightly data builds here. We'll be working on the teacher course endorsement data. I'm not sure if we'll end up seeing that data in the Advisor validation side or NSSRS validation, or maybe both, because we still have that staff endorsement report running in the NSSRS validation side. So it might be both. Then after that will come CTE participants, building that based on course section data, like we've been talking about. The CTE programs of study, again, being built off of course section enrollments. And then we'll have some reports that go along with those. So we'll be working on those.
What was your timeline for the participants being able to see those? It's Amy again.
Probably won't happen until March, I'm
Okay.
gonna guess.
So March. I'm okay with that. Just asking. Thanks.
Because, yeah, before that, I want to work on some of the fixes for the dashboard, which keep getting pushed back. But that's still on my list. Like I said, a couple of the quick fixes to make sure the demographics and attendance numbers look correct, and to get rid of that bug where the dashboard asks you to log in a second time. So that's up on my list next, actually. Any other questions, comments about the validation site?
Max, is there ever going to be a report that will tell us who, it may already be out there and I'm just missing it, who has the directory information opt-out flagged?
That's part of the
It's
traffic lookup.
Oh, yeah, it should be. You can search for it in the student lookup by demographics.
Oh.
It also appears in the student lookup by ID. There's no like actual report for it.
Okay, as long as I can pull them all together. So if I do the student lookup by demographics to pull them all together. Okay.
Yeah, I believe we added that there.
Okay, that's all I needed. Thank you.
Yeah, or yeah, if it's not there, we can definitely, that would be the place where we should add it. Right, just a note about our advisor SI upgrade for the 1920 school year. We'll be keeping you updated about this as we go. We're close to getting the sandboxes ready. Jill's been working on a lot of technical issues with getting that set up. We may have to do some database upgrades on our side as well. So we are working on that now. Hopefully within a couple weeks, week or two, we should have that ready. We will email the vendors the link to the sandbox, as well as some of the vendor documentation when that is all ready to go.
And that will be stage one of the vendor sandbox. There'll be a second stage where we need to still gather from the department any potential changes we need to make for 1920. In addition, there may be a few tweaks in order to incorporate the latest CRDC, the 1718 CRDC data.
But yeah,
that would be a second sandbox later on.
This initial version will have all the core 3.1 stuff, as well as all of our current extensions.
Yeah.
So, yep, it'll definitely be subject to change, but that should allow the vendors to really get a good look at the new system. All right, continuing our focus on attendance. Just same as I've mentioned before, you know, I've had a meeting with Power School and Infinite Campus about this. There's some fixes that I don't believe are all deployed yet. NDE is also still having some internal meetings to kind of clarify who needs what data. We're going to include some extra guidance on some of the technical stuff about, you know, how does the calendar get set up, what type of days count towards ADA and ADM. How are the absences? How should absences be sent up? How does that contribute to ADA and ADM? I think we'll also be sending out a bulletin item pretty soon when some of this stuff is clear to us, covering some of that same guidance. So hopefully about the time that you see that bulletin item, we should maybe have that documentation ready. I think we could try to do that. One thing that Omaha brought up, they were asking about the attendance, and this also applies to calendar day durations. They are right now, we've told the vendors to only send us 2 decimal places for these. And for a long time, our rule about attendance is specified that we only need to send up 2 decimal places. I believe that Omaha is getting an error, and I forget if it's an error or a warning. It could be a warning about attendance record reported with 0 duration. So attendance records reported with a 0 duration, basically, they don't hurt anything, but they basically don't count as an absence. Since, you know, we do the math of, we take the student's days present, subtract, or the days enrolled, subtract the days absent to get the days present. You know, an absence of 0 doesn't really count toward anything. Now, Ahmad said a lot of these are coming from Infinite Campus, rounding some records down to 0. Like if it's a very short, tardy record in campus, that gets reported to us as a 0.0. Terry, I saw you were on there.
Right. So what we've run into is if they are absent 0, 1, 2, and I think 3 minutes, it ends up rounding down to 0. And you say, how can somebody be absent 0 minutes and count? It's if they show up after the bell rang. You know, in a school, they aren't worried about rounding like we are. They're saying when the bell rings, you better be in class, and if you're not, you're tardy. So then the kid goes to the tardy office. Well, it's still in the first minute, and they're marked with 0 minutes of absence. Now, we have always done all of them as absences. We don't do tardies because we were trying to do it to the nearest 100th of the day, so we count every minute as an educational minute that they would have missed. And it's causing us, we have over 9,000 errors that mostly, I'm sure, are related to that, but in some cases are true errors. I was curious how many other districts don't use tardies but count every minute as an absence. Anybody else?
To be clear, you're reporting those tardies to us as unexcused absences?
Yes.
I think it would vary across the state. Out of the districts we work with, which is 60-ish. This is Amy with Power School. I'm trying to think. I don't know if tardies actually get marked up. I'll have to go look, sent up as absent, since NDE doesn't no, they don't. We mark them as an in session. And so they do periods. Most of our districts do period today. So if they have 8 periods, then that's just divided amongst. And so, yeah, it's not down to the minute. But we are starting to get questions. We do have some Power School districts who are starting to ask the questions, what would, in fact, somebody I was talking to yesterday, what would minute attendance look like? So.
Yeah. I think taking it from the state accountability side, since we only ask for 2 decimals, like the state, if you have something that rounds down to less than 0.01, then from the state's perspective, it doesn't exist. However, I would see that being useful to be reported in Ed5. It's definitely something that you may want to see in the dashboard. But maybe in that case, the 0 duration is just really not wrong.
I would say for the Sims districts, we're not sending tardy data right now because what they would consider a tardy because we're nobody's using the dashboard yet. And then as far as being absent, I would agree with Amy. It's more of a case of you have 8 periods a day. You're either there for that period or you're not. And I think it would vary by district. At what point are you considered tardy versus absent? Like, do you have to miss 10 minutes or what the rule is? But that would be our perspective on it.
I
I
don't
would be
know
curious.
that the state has any guidance about the difference between those.
I would be curious to know what districts consider, when the cutoff is for districts. If you're tardy for 9 minutes, are you then absent when you hit 10? Or how do some of you other ones do it?
Well, and the other question, Max, isn't this attendance data? I know there's a state statute for it. And I think you report ADA to the federal government, but it's not used for state aid currently, and it will be used for AQuest or the tenants, like.
Attendance.
Is that how it's used? I just want to make sure.
Not ADA, but yes. Yeah, definitely. Just absences in general, chronic absenteeism is definitely part of accountability going forward.
And we report chronic absenteeism to the feds too.
And it's good that it doesn't affect the money, but it makes it impossible for us to go through all of our attendance errors. Because like I said, I know there are other errors. If a student comes in a half hour late, then the secretary is required to put in the number of minutes that they were present. And for our elementary schools, they only have 2 periods, morning and afternoon. If the secretary forgets to put in the number of minutes present, then they end up with counting the whole period as absent.
That wouldn't be reported as a 0, though, would it? Well, it would come across as a 0 because there'd be 0 minutes present. And they'd forget to put in the fact that the kid was really there for 120 minutes, or I don't know what the half-day mark is, but. Yeah, but then I think because we are only collecting the absence length, so campus might automatically convert that to 120 minutes of absence, which is, I don't know what that is, 0.12 or something of a day. So,
Yeah.
It could be, so like I said, the error about a 0 length attendance duration is really only there as kind of a double check. It's like I said, there's nothing technically wrong with those records. If it makes sense, we just downgrade it to a warning, or we could shut it off entirely. I don't know if it's really doing any good for anyone.
Do other people have 0s in there? Can you tell me? I'm trying to think of other cases. My problem is I'm not totally convinced that all 9,100 records are due to that, but I'm not really sure how to figure out if there are other errors out there. So do other people get the 0 thing, and how come? For what reasons?
Which is I know some other districts definitely have it. Let me find out that error number here so you guys know what I'm talking about. Go ahead, Amy.
Well, the one thing I will say on that field, this year that was an extension field. Next year it is a core field, and the core field is 2 decimal places.
Yeah,
So it's the absence duration missing one.
706.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be 2 decimal places next year.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
So how does Infinite Campus send that information? I guess that's probably my question. So are they rounding it for you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, campuses, I mean, everyone, all the vendors have to do that. They convert it into a 2-digit decimal length part of a day and send that up. So yeah, campus is converting that and legitimately rounding it to 0.00 and then sending it up. And so that's why they get this. And I don't know if other vendors may just see that it rounds to 0 and not send it. That's definitely possible too. I'm not sure.
So the other districts that have that max, are they all Infinite Campus? We've got the, all in.
There's a bunch of Infinite Campus, a couple of EduStar, EduPoint. Yeah, no Power School, I don't think.
Lincoln has it too. Yeah,
So,
Becky just
Yeah,
shared a
there's-
comment with us. She's having speaker problems.
um, oh yeah, Becky, yeah, I didn't hear you. You may be muted. Yeah, I'm not sure how FTE gets involved, but again, that's just a calculation that all happens within the vendor. They have to convert it into basically a length of a fraction of a length of a day. So I couldn't tell you exactly how they're doing that off the top of my head. Yeah. So I don't know if there's other errors in this. You mentioned that, Terry. You're worried if there's other ways that kids could get a 0 reported. I don't know if I would be able to tell you that though, looking at the data, like I said,
Yeah.
because that all version happens before it ever gets sent to us.
So I'm going to ask Dan Hightower, if you're, I think I saw you on this meeting. You're in Millard, you use Infinite Campus, but you told me that you guys use Tardies. So I'm trying to figure out how you would end up with 0s. There's got to be some other way that it's ending up out there, which means I should be concerned still.
Well,
I
so
mean, they could, we do support sending up tardies as tardies as well. They don't count as absences for the state, but those, Millard could be sending those records up too.
So you can send a tardy. It won't go to a state accountability, as in the ADA, ADM attendance data, but it would go to the dashboard.
Yes.
Is that what I hear you saying? Okay. No, I just needed some clarification on that.
So the rounding issue may still apply. They may just have 0 length tardies instead of 0 length unexcused absences.
Oh, okay.
Hey, this is Jennifer from Millard. Dan doesn't have a mic today, but he's typing in the chat box an answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Dan, that's correct. Yeah, tardies don't count as absences for the state. So Terry, I would try to help you some more if we could figure out. I don't know if I can just give you the list of all the students with the error and their dates, if that will help tell you anything. But at this time, I don't know that anyone's said that there's any other problem with campus reporting 0s. I'm not sure about that, other than because of the rounding issue. I think Michelle and John were on. You guys have any other campus tickets about the 0 absence duration specifically?
Hi, this is Michelle. Sorry, it took me a minute to get unmuted. No, there was an SIS on that with a rounding error, but I believe that's been resolved. So I assume what you're hitting is just that.
I mean, this isn't a rounding error. Correctly rounded down to 0. So.
Right, yeah, that she's just experiencing the 1 or 2 minute absent that is calculating down to 0.
I guess I guess it's really kind of a vendor's decision as to whether they send those zeros or not. I can't really say that it's either way is preferred. So
We'll talk to Michelle.
yeah,
We'll
I can
talk
try
with
to.
Michelle and Don later.
I could summarize that data for you because I know that list is gigantic, Terry, and I could send that off to you to help cross-check it against your campus data. But so far,
Yep.
I don't know that we have any other problems other than just the rounding.
Okay. If you could send it, that'd be great. The last time we got it, it had 8,000 some, and we can't pull it up there. It won't pull because it's so big.
Yeah,
So that'd be great if you could send it. Thanks.
we'll do that. All right, another thing, still focusing on your course sections and enrollment. I think rolled out a few tweaks to those reports as well. I had to make some changes because advisor is different than NSSRS in that under NSSRS, you send us a student grade record that had to have a student and a course section and a teacher all tied together. But under EdFi, you first send the section record, which defines, the course, and then separately you send a staff section association and a student section association. So technically you could send a section up, but never send those. And it's a section defined, but it has no teacher and it has no students if you do that. Or you could have a section with students and no teacher, or a section with a teacher but no students. So I made some changes in some of these reports to reflect that. Like if you're looking at the course, the courses report that lists all the courses, or you're looking at the student courses report, which shows for every student, every course they're taking. You may see something listed as no teacher reported. Now, that just means that section has no staff associated. And in some cases, that may actually be correct. So it's not an error because we have this staff ID override field set up, which is for reporting staff that are not in staff reporting. Like if you have a college dual credit teacher teaching a course, we have this field, I think it's called the evaluator staff ID field, which is basically a staff override field for your courses. However, in this year, it is part of that override field, it's part of the grade record. And so since you don't send the grade record till the end of the year or the end of the course, in between, it looks like a course that has no teachers. So that is actually something we've changed in next year's setup. So the staff override is part of the section, not the grade. But just to let you know, that's something that is different than NSSRS. And I believe we just added the teacher no courses report as well. So that is in the course and section area of the verification reports. So please go check all of those out. All of the reports are basically based on section data, except for the one new report that's called grade details. So that one actually pulls grade data. And just to be clear, all grades are always connected to a section. So by definition, if you have reported a grade record, you have a section record that goes with it. But all of the other reports are only based on that section data alone, which is stuff you may have sent up back in October, basically. So I'm not really aware of any major issues with those, but just wanted to remind people to look at those early. So otherwise, I'm sure some districts have probably found when they go to submit grades, they may get errors. That's definitely something I have seen before. Like if the section record never got sent up, when you try to send up the grade, it'll give you an error that says like section does not exist. I forget the exact. Right. Lastly, vendor updates. Nothing huge at the moment. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Kathy was asking about letter grades or numeric grades. That is not a problem. Under advisor, there's two separate fields: a letter grade field and a numeric grade field. The letter grade field, you can send up anything in there. It could be A plus. I know district uses like 1, 1 plus, 1 minus, 2 plus, something like that. Really anything in there. So the old restrictions under NSSRS where you could only send, you know, A, B, C, D, F, P, and P, that's gone. I think we are actually working on a new error, or we're upgrading an error. I think there used to be an error that said like high school students can't report NA as a grade because we have the requirement that 9th through 12th graders have to report grades according to the rule. So that error becomes a high school students must report a grade, meaning either the letter grade has to not be blank or the numeric grade has to not be blank. Other than that, just one of those has to be filled in. It doesn't matter which, or both. And we will count that as a submitted grade. I forget how the report works now. I think it takes the letter grade if it's there over the numeric grade, but I could also change it to display both if we wanted.
Is NA not a valid?
No, well, NA is a valid, since we have no restrictions on what the letter grades are.
They could still put
You could submit N and A as a grade, and we don't know what that means, you know. That doesn't necessarily mean not available or not applicable anymore. We have no idea. That could be one of your grades. So there's really no checks on that anymore. The one new bit in the vendor status updates is NDE had a meeting with SRS as well as some of the SPED team from NDE. And we talked about some of the issues we were having. I think SRS came out with a few tweaks they were going to make on their end. I'm not exactly sure what those are. On our end, we talked about the difficulties we were having with the errors that check a student's age versus when they go from their setting. You've got those worked out so that it really matches how the SPED team expects it to work now. Basically, you don't have to change your setting on a student's birthday, you know. I don't want to try to name the details off the top of my head, but anyway, the error is a lot more forgiving now. It should not be flagging students immediately on their birthday because the SPED rules don't actually expect you to be changing that student's setting on their birthday. So I think we shut off a couple errors and we retooled some of the existing errors. So I think there's just one age check versus setting error for Part C and each of the Part Bs, I think. So I think that's all I had. Our next meeting is March 13th. Any other questions or topics of discussion? Go ahead and bring them up. All right. I think that'll be it for this month. Thanks for joining, everyone, and we will talk to you again in March.
Okay, thank you.